actor, comedian, jazz musician, activist, and of course, Belleville, Illinois native Lea DeLaria coming here to Chicago in July. Lea, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're coming to the Big Gay Cabaret July 19th through the 21st at the Venus Cabaret on Southport. Let's talk a little bit about your connection to Chicago, because 2017, you led the Pride Parade. You were the Grand Marshal there.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your time here and what our city means to you.
Oh, I love Chicago. I always have fun when I go there. I hate going there in the summer, though. I gotta say, I was like, when this came down the pike, I'm trying to write a new show. So having 3 days in a row in front of a different audience while I work on stuff is always great. You know what I mean? So I can go, okay, that works or that doesn't work or whatever. You know, it's always great to have something like that. So I was really ready to do it. And then I was, Chicago in July.
Well, as far as like growing up, because Belleville, St. Louis is the closest big city to there. Did you spend a lot of time, coming up here, or was kind of St. Louis your bigger city that you had?
No, I went to St. Louis because it was literally across the river from Belleville.
Yeah.
But I went to Illinois Wesleyan up top, and when I was in Illinois Wesleyan, Bloomington, right? I would occasionally go to Chicago because it's just a couple hour drive from there. But to get there from Belleville, please, honey, that's a 5-hour drive. That's a 6-hour drive.
Yeah. When I looked on social media, and I happened to see you playing music alongside at a high school reunion that you had done in 2011.
Oh my God.
Were you always friends? Like, did you always keep in touch with the people that you went to school with, or your community, or like just certain people? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was in the theater. I was a theater person in high school, and I also competed in individual events. And you find that when you're in something like that, you become very close to people, and because usually everybody else is making fun of you, so you become very close to people. I was lucky though in that I was able to flip from group to group to group. Everybody just kind of liked me, probably because it was funny. And so that I think was really helpful. But those people that were in the theater with me, we became incredibly tight-knit people. Anybody in music, art, whatever, all of us kind of stayed together. In fact, my two closest friends are still my two closest friends. We talk to each other constantly. We always say we've been best friends longer than we haven't, or we've been best friends since, before driver's licenses. We're all 66 years old now, and we're still completely and utterly inseparable. So yeah. Now that my family has kind of moved out of Belleville, I don't get back anymore. That's kind of unfortunate, but yeah.
That means they got to make the trip up to Chicago. They got to make that 5-hour trip up to Chicago to come see you at the show, right?
Oh well, they know about it. We'll see. They've done it before. They drove to see me in Indianapolis, so I've seen them do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Let's talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about music or about theater. Let's talk comedy first. Catholic school, the nuns. Was this kind of the reason that you kind of found your humor, or were you able to find your voice?
You watched me on Conan.
Yeah.
The nuns, honest to God, I figured out when I was very young that if I could make a nun laugh, she wasn't going to hit me the way she was hitting everybody else with a ruler or with because I went to Catholic school when they corporal punishment, they didn't care. Yeah. If you went home and went, Mom, the nun hit me, she'd go, well, you probably deserve it. And she'd hit you again. We are of a different age and a different generation, and that that's how we were raised. So I was like, I'm not going to get any help at home. I got to figure out, and I've got a smart mouth. I've got to figure out how to win these nuns over so they won't be whacking me so much. And that was kind of it. I think that's where I just kind of first started being goofy and funny.
I was dying during that Conan O'Brien interview because when you tell the story of a horse with no name,
oh my God,
can you please tell it again? Because I
True
could not
story.
make it. I was dying.
True story. So our homeroom teacher, Sister Melissa, was, I would say she was so old, she was a topless waitress at the Last Supper, is what I generally say about her. She's really old. And she was our English teacher. So she gave us an assignment to write a poem. We had the weekend to do it. And I couldn't be bothered. I was like, I'm not going to write a poem. So it was Monday, and I was like, I'm supposed to turn in a poem. So I wrote down the lyrics to A Horse with No Name, which was huge on the radio at the time, and turned it in. And there was no way she was going to be listen to the radio. I mean, she's like a 110-year-old nun, so she's not listening to the radio. She's not going to know this song. All I want to do was just get a C. I figured the lyrics weren't that, you know what I mean? They were great for me as a teenager, but for an English nun, that might not work in terms of a poem. So the next day, she's grading her papers, and she's basically standing and saying, there's a person, she comes, there, some of us did very well and blah, 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 but there's a person who went farther than anybody could have with their poem. Lea DeLaria, please come up and read your poem in front of the class. So, like, I'm so busted. So I go up, and I'm funny, right? So I went, fuck it. So I just went, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. And now the kids start giggling. In the desert, no one can call you your name. So, like, I'm reading it. And then they just, as I continue to read it, they realize they just burst out laughing. The whole class burst out laughing. So now I'm like, I'm so busted. But no, Sister Melissa stands up and goes, what is wrong with you heathens? This girl is pouring her life out in this poem. And you're laughing at her. So they all got in trouble. And I'm the only one who didn't. And I completely plagiarized that poem. And of course, nobody's going to narc. So,
I wonder if, like, years later, she was listening, happened to listen to music, like, oh my goodness, the poem that Lea wrote is now a famous song.
It's now a famous song. I know, probably. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Oh my goodness, I love that story. Were you always unapologetically yourself? Like, yeah. I've never given a fuck what other people think about me. You know what I mean? I care what they think. I want to talk to a human being. I want to listen to what they have to say. I want to respond in kind, and I expect the same from them. If I don't get that, then there's trouble. But I do not give a fuck what other people think about me. So I'm always been very unapologetically, this is who I am. I want to talk about the first time that I saw you on television. It was also your very first appearance was on Arsenio Hall, because
the Arsenio Hall show, yeah.
I mean, as a young gay kid, you had Ricky Lake and you had Arsenio Hall, which was the time that you could see the guests that you wanted to hear about, or people that were telling stories that, like, that you could relate to. Talk a little bit about that opportunity and maybe how you met Arsenio.
It was crazy. And, the thing is, nobody thought it was going to be me. I was very well known. At that time, it was 93. So I've been doing it for about 11 years. And everybody who was queer knew who I was, because back in those days, anybody who was queer was coming to Provincetown for a vacation, because it was one of the few places where you could be a queer tourist and have everything you need at your fingertips. So it was an entirely kind of queer town. And I was one of the guys. I was the first lesbian act in Provincetown. So I was one of the people that you came to see in Provincetown, which then led me to touring all over North America in the off season from Provincetown. And I was always sort of the bad girl. Everybody always thought of me as the bad girl of lesbian comedy. And Kate Clinton was the good girl of lesbian comedy. And by the way, Kate and I are dear friends. We're good friends. So this is and I think everybody thought it was going to be Kate that was going to break this barrier. But enter Arsenio Hall, who was edgy. He wanted to have the edgy people on. And so rather than the kind of smart political people, and I was edgy. And in fact, when they invited me to do this, it was because I was doing a show at a place called Highways in Los Angeles, which was a performance space for queer people that Tim Miller started. And so I was going to do a 2-week run there, and the LA Times gave me above the fold page 1 of the entertainment section that weekend. And the next thing I knew, I mean, all the shows were sold out. I was getting these nonstop phone calls, managers, agents, all these people were coming up to me, and I didn't know what to do. So I called a person I had known for years, Melissa Etheridge, and I said, so Melissa, blah, this is happening to me, and I'm not quite sure how to handle it because I've always been not in the mainstream media. So we're talking, and they knock on the door, and they're like, Lea, you have a phone call. And I said, how can I have a phone call? I'm on the phone. This was before we had, how can I have a phone call? They called on the payphone. I said, I'm talking to Melissa Etheridge. And they said, but it's the Arsenio Hall show. And I went, Melissa, I'll call you back. So that's how I got on Arsenio. And before I went out, Arsenio did something that he never does. He came into the dressing room to talk to me before the show started. Most hosts will never do that. I mean, Conan never does that because they want it all to be happening on the couch. Yeah. But he wanted to come say how excited he was to have me. How, you know what I mean? I think he knew that I was nervous, that it was a big deal. Yeah. And not only was it a big deal, I had fucking 2020 following me. So not only was I doing the Arsenio Hall show, I was being filmed by 2020 while I was doing it. I mean, it's like craziness. Yeah. So I did my stand-up, and of course you're worried you're going to bomb, but I didn't. I fucking slayed. I killed. And then I went over to the couch and I slayed and killed on the couch. And the Advocate at the time counted, and apparently I was on for 9.5 minutes, and I said the words dyke, fag, or queer 47 times in 9.5 minutes. So what people don't know, this is the little known fact, after the show, after it was done, the lawyers for Fox didn't want to air it. They did not want to air it. They thought because of the language that I used that it would cause them trouble. And Arsenio went to bat for me. Arsenio said, yeah, if she wants to call herself a dyke, a fag, or a queer, who are we to tell her not to? And I went on, and the rest is, history. It was crazy.
I mean, that's such an amazing story. And thank you so much for sharing that with me, because I feel like he has done so many wonderful things, and maybe he doesn't get the accolades that he should. But between having you on and Madonna and Rosie and RuPaul, it always just felt like a safe space that if you were a queer artist or you had a queer audience, that you could go to the show and he was going to treat the guests with respect.
Yeah. And he was the #1 late night show at the time. He was beating the Tonight Show. He was beating Letterman. He was the one. And so, it changed my life. That was the first time my life was changed. Yeah. My life has changed several times.
Several times since then. 2 more questions about that experience. Did they tell you what you could and could not say, or were they just have 5 minutes, go for it? You
have, whenever you're going to do stand-up on any show, you have to talk it through with the producer. So yes, I talked it through with the producer, and they were like, go with God. Go with God. have a ball. You can say all of this. It's hilarious, and say it. So I did.
I think the other observation that I because I went back and recently watched your interview, and I watched the set, was, I'm not sure if it was all queer audience or, who was in the audience, but the amount of laughter, the amount of acceptance, the way that you just killed it from the very moment. I was like, what a wonderful place to be at that moment in 1993 of just, you didn't know who was going to come out, or it wasn't, your background, or it just wasn't who you were, but you didn't mention it, but people were laughing along with you. And it was so beautiful. I just loved it.
There were queer people in the audience. Yeah. But it wasn't like it was stacked with queer people. Yeah. In fact, there was a majority not queer audience, which is, it could be disconcerting. But when I said that very first line, it's the 1990s, it's hip to be queer, and I'm a big dyke, and they screamed the way they screamed, I went, I'm set. I'm set. I knew that it was going to be okay. And then by the time I got to gay Tourette syndrome, it was, where I out myself uncontrollably, one of my better jokes, and that and the U-Haul joke, one of my better jokes. So yeah, it was great. And in fact, they had Lea DeLaria watching parties all over West Hollywood, the different gay bars. They knew that I was going to be on. So that night they had these watching parties to watch me break this barrier, which was kind of great. So I went because, you film it at 5, but it doesn't air until 10, 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. So I kind of went into these watching parties and, waved at everyone and everything. It was fun.
That was awesome. You just mentioned the U-Haul joke. Happy 35th anniversary. I believe 1989 was the year that Your first
88,
time,
but yes,
98.
88,
Yeah.
but yes. Yeah.
Well, it's over 35 years of that joke. This was one of those things. This was before social media of something that was like trending. So people either had to come and see you in person, listen to one of the recordings, have it as a joke. But even like being a young queer person, like this is something that you heard. At what point, like, did you know, like, oh, this isn't just people coming to my show. This had gone viral and it's bigger than
West
me.
Coast. So remember when I said everybody came to Provincetown?
Yeah.
So what I would do is I had a way that I worked, and I did that joke in Provincetown, and then I went to the West Coast to do my West Coast tour, and it beat me to the West Coast. It's a joke because the joke is so easy to tell that it just fucking beat me to the West Coast, and I was like, Jesus Christ. It was insane. So I had to expand my territory. Finally, I got to tell that joke again on stage when I was in Europe and Australia. But now they're all, it's the same thing. They all know this joke was just so simple to tell. I wrote that one and the companion joke. I mean, what does a lesbian bring on a first date? What does a gay man bring on a first date? What does a gay man bring on a second date? What second date? So that's the companion joke, right? Not first date, second date. Look, I ruined my own joke.
Let's talk a little bit about music. You credit your dad as part of the inspiration to getting into jazz music. You've been putting out albums for the better part of 2 decades. I mean, talk a little bit about what we're going to see in the show and your love of jazz music.
Yeah, well, there'll be my shows always have comedy and jazz and Broadway, so there'll be a couple of like I'm definitely going to do I Can Cook too, because people always generally want to hear it, especially gay men of a certain age. So I will probably be doing that. So yeah, if it's just been kind of the way I have done my shows since the inception of me doing shows, since 1982 when I first started performing. I've always had music as a part of the show. Then back then there was more comedy than music. Now it's very even. In fact, there's probably a little more music than there is comedy. Once you star in several Broadway musicals and then you have these records out on a major label, you have to acknowledge the fact that that's a part of what you're doing. So that's what people are going to see from me. They're going to be seeing I'm working on some new comedy material. I'm going to be doing some old stuff, and I'm going to be doing some new music as well. So it's going to be a really fun show. That's that's all I can say. It's going to be a really interesting, fun show, and Chicago's going to get something that nobody else has gotten so far.
That is amazing because you're also doing 54 Below, which is an incredible venue in New York City. So people who are on the East Coast can go ahead and check you out there. Coming here to Chicago to do something like this. But what are you loving so much as far as these cabaret shows and getting to incorporate? I mean, you're great, amazing at POTUS.
54 Below is so much fun.
Yeah.
I do the second Sunday of every month. It's a brunch show. I have a different theme for every show and a different guest for every show. So every show is new and different. And so much fun. And just, it's and getting to be in front of a live audience. I just did, I guess it was 6 months of Night of the Iguana. So I was doing a play. I was doing a Tennessee Williams play for many, many, many months. And then it was like, I need to be back making people laugh. I was making people laugh. I was comic relief for this play, but Tennessee Williams he's a wordy motherfucker. And that was a 3-hour play. So I'm like, I need short, sweet, make people laugh, sing some songs, have some fun. That was, just really wonderful. So I'm exploring those roots again. I've been making a ton of movies. I just finished shooting 3 movies, and I've got 2 more coming before I even come to Chicago that I'm making. So it's a tad nutty. It's a tad nutty right now, film wise. So that's why it's great to just be in front of an audience, making people laugh, belting a D sharp, blowing over changes. Nothing makes me happier. And then when I'm done and the show is over, I'm going to bugger off to the Green Mill every fucking night probably and listen to whatever jazz is there.
Oh my goodness, Lea, I could talk to you for 4.5 hours and still not get enough. I just want to tell you that right now.
Rudy.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Lea DeLaria coming to the Big Gay Cabaret July 19th to the 21st. 3745 North Southport, biggaycabaret.com for those tickets. And we will see you in Chicago very, very soon.
Oh, please come and say hi to me after the show, honey.
I definitely will.
All right, Rudy. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.